We all ready to get started? All right, let's do the thing. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Finding My Flock, the conservation story with Deja Perkins. I am not Deja Perkins. My name is Antonio Flores. I'm the Program and Communications Manager for CAS. I want to let everyone know that this program is being recorded. And of course, we look forward to sharing this out with everyone, but also don't feel pressured to appear on camera. If you look down in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see a bunch of options to control your video and audio. There's other cool options that you can play around with to customize your Zoom experience. If you accidentally click on leaving the meeting, even then it asks you to confirm before actually leaving. So feel free to play with everything, you won't blow anything up. If you hung out with us before, you know the deal. If you're new around here, and some of you are, thank you for coming, thank you for being here. We want to make sure that you feel very welcome here, so we'll give you a little breakdown of the program, but I also want to talk a little bit about what we do here at CAS. So the way that this program is going to go is that this is called Bird Feed. It's a program we do every now and then, usually Tuesday evenings, where we just talk about different topics. You know today's topic. After this little rambling of an introduction, Deja will do her presentation. It will be amazing. And then we'll have a advocacy alert from one of our volunteers, Sarah Brotherton, and then we'll go on to Q&A. During the presentation, if anything comes to mind, you want to ask any questions, please do type them into the box, in the chat box below. And at the end of the program, one of our lovely board members, Jen Johnson, will be reading them out to Deja, and we'll try to get as many of them answered live here on the program. And if not, we'll address them in a follow-up email afterwards. As far as CAS goes, we're a grassroots nonprofit. We run on the strength of volunteers. So we do have a staff of 1 employee, and at the risk of getting into a little bit of trouble, I want to say that he's a very handsome fellow. It's me. What we do at CAS is we connect people with birds and nature through educational programming, field trips, advocacy, stewardship, and research. What we want is for all communities in our area to understand, value, and protect birds and other wildlife and habitat. So, here we go. Deja Perkins is an expert on urban ecology and environmental justice. Her research focuses on the intersections of urban ecology and environmental justice, with emphasis on looking at how bird habitat is influenced by human culture and historical socioeconomic structures. An alumna of both Tuskegee University and North Carolina State University, she has expertise in community science, climate change, birds, and socio-ecological structures in urban environments. Deja is one of the co-organizers of the Black Birders Week social media movement and currently the president of Black AF in STEM, the membership organization that organized Black Birders Week. She has been featured in the Scientific American, Science News, Discover Magazine, WTTW Chicago, and the Ologies podcast. Her groundbreaking work as a researcher, science communicator, and activist has equipped her to become one of the leading voices on matters related to diversity, equity, and inclusion in the environmental space, as well as nature in your backyard and academic and career development for youth. Please welcome Deja Perkins.
Hello, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining me today as I share my story with you and I share my path and my journey through conservation and finding my love of birds. And I hope that my story will be able to connect all of us together. It will help inspire and honestly just help to bring us together and think about better ways that we can make birding something that multiple people enjoy. And so today my presentation is Finding My Flock, my conservation story. And so this is where my story begins. I grew up in the Calumet Heights area, really close to Stony Island. And the only park that we ever visited growing up was Jesse Owens Park. And so my experience with the outdoors was mostly through sports growing up. So I have fond memories of visiting this park and, you know, playing tennis outside or playing on the playground or even just running around in the field. And at that time, in my mind, the only reason that trees existed was to provide shade. So I had no idea of all of the different interactions that were going on in the community. And my early experiences with wildlife and my early exposure to wildlife were through things like Canada geese and house sparrows, because these were the only things that I was really able to see or pay attention to growing up. And that's because Canada geese are so large, and they're, you know, the biggest bird that I knew of at the time. And I was always amazed and fascinated when driving down Lakeshore Drive and passing the Museum of Science and Industry and seeing these birds. And my mom would always, she would tell me that I would say, oh, look, there go my babies. And I was always excited to see them. So at some point growing up, I always had some type of affinity for birds. And really, I didn't even know that there were other birds that existed in cities, and that, you know, aside from Canada geese, pigeons, and, you know, the house sparrows that we typically see flying around inside McDonald's of Navy Pier. But that's all I knew. But I knew that I loved animals. And so for me growing up, I always wanted to go to the zoo and the aquarium, because this is what my idea of wildlife was. This is what I thought existed. And, you know, Chicago didn't have any wildlife. But I would always constantly ask my mom to go to the zoo and aquarium. And I'm pretty sure we saw the dolphin show so many times that I memorized the show by heart. And whenever we would go and travel and visit places, I would always ask to go to the zoo, because I wanted to see how how zoos differed across the US. And this was my idea of wildlife. And this kind of just reinforced the idea that wildlife didn't really exist in the US. Well, in Chicago, especially, because whenever you're looking at National Geographic or Animal Planet, you see all these, you know, large mega fauna. And it's usually, you know, lions, tigers, bears, dolphins, giraffes, and all the things that people really, really are familiar with and can get excited about and think are cute and cuddly. And so my mom always pushed me to look up more details about what I wanted to do. And at the time, because I was always at the zoo and always at the aquarium, I thought to myself, I'm either going to be a dolphin trainer, a zookeeper, or a veterinarian. And she always pushed me to look up and see like how I could get there, what exactly I needed to do to be able to be those things. And so trying to look up programs and looking up like how much I get paid as a zookeeper or a dolphin trainer made me quickly realize that I didn't want to be a dolphin trainer. And so I kept trying to find programs and things that would help me get exposure and learn more, because at the moment, the only idea is what I had seen as, you know, a visitor at the zoo, or what I had watched on Animal Planet. And, you know, there wasn't that much representation, so I wasn't even sure if it was something that I can do. But I did know that being a veterinarian was a really profitable and successful career path. It was basically being a doctor, but for animals. And so that's what I had my mind set on for a very long time. But of course, didn't really find any programs that would help expose me to being a veterinarian. And so the Brookfield Zoo and Lincoln Park Zoo were just a little bit too far, and they never really had programs that were available. And so I ended up finding programs at the Shed Aquarium. And so then I began to go down this path to becoming a marine biologist. And I did a few programs at the Shed, including the Teen Science Expedition to the Bahamas and their Shed Stewards program and a few of their other programs. And it was the best experience that I had had in my life up until that point. And so we went to the Bahamas, we saw wild dolphins, we learned about dolphin and shark research, we did our own research, our mini projects, and we went snorkeling and learned how to ID marine fish using ID books. And so we did science, we did real science. And I was blown away, because I had no idea that this was something that really was available for me to do. And the only downside to this program is that it was extremely expensive. And so this program, I was only able to experience once. A lot of, the programs at the Shedd Aquarium have a fee associated with them. And so it was really hard for me to convince my mom that it was something that I needed to do, but thankfully I did. And I was really lucky that I was able to do these experiences at all, because I didn't realize at the time, as a child, as a teenager, just how expensive those programs were. And so I also realized at the time that I wasn't as good of a swimmer as I thought. And so I thought about looking for something a little bit close to home, a little bit more, on solid ground, so I can keep my feet. And my mom was actually the one who found the Fishing Buddies program. And she said, hey, let's try this out. And at the time, I was a little skeptical, because I thought, based off the name, like, I don't really want to learn how to, go fishing. I want to actually handle animals. I want to do all of these like cool things. And I'm like, I don't want to just sit there and watch fish. And so when I actually participated in the Fishing Buddies program, it was the first time that I had really been exposed to a variety of natural resource careers and management careers. And I had no idea that it was something that was possible. So we visited these places that I had no idea existed within the city of Chicago and the surrounding areas. So we visited Camp Sagawau, we visited Tampier Lake, we visited Wolf Lake, we visited Bobian Woods, and we worked with USDA, and we worked with Fish and Wildlife Service. And, we got to see birds up close and see, turtles, and learn about what it takes to manage the resources that we actually have here in Chicago. And so at the time, for me, I had no idea that all of this stuff existed. You see driving on the highway, you see, the trees, and you see the forest, but you don't know exactly what lays behind. You don't know that there are actual trails and things to do. And so one of the benefits of the fishing, an additional benefit of the Fishing Buddies program that was unlike any of the other programs, was that they paid students instead of asking students to pay them to go through this experience. And so that was one huge benefit. And so we were able to go to all these really cool places and meet these people who were doing important work, amazing work, and things that I had no idea that existed. And so I came back after my first year, and I actually became a leader of the Fishing Buddies program. And I helped to lead the same group that I was a part of the year before, and help expose children to not children, but teens, to the same experiences that I had experienced before. And really, for me, it was more so about being able to experience those things again, because at the time, I still hadn't been able to experience those types of things even after I had gone away for college my first year. And so the first lesson that I really want to emphasize in your minds tonight is the lack of accessible programming for outdoor exploration. And so this either means that programming is, a lot of times, for me at least growing up, programming was either stuck behind a paywall or there was no knowledge of programming that was available. Especially, getting out into the different high schools and just having that knowledge being passed down from different people who worked at my school, or people who were supposed to expose us to those things. And so I still went down this path to become a veterinarian, and I had this idea of natural resource careers, and I thought I kind of wanted to work for U.S. Fish and Wildlife, but, trying to figure out what I wanted to do for college, I really had to get myself outside of this environment. So I went from here to here, and I ended up at Tuskegee, Alabama, which is the place that graduates 70% of African-American veterinarians in the US. And that is something that I still had in my mind that I wanted to pursue. And so I left the place that I was familiar with, and I went down to a foreign environment, someplace that was completely different in every aspect of the word. And it was a very different environment, but I was exposed to a lot of different things. And I came in as an animal science major. because I was still somewhat interested in vet school, but I thought I had enrolled in the wildlife program. And I had this misconception about what animal science was. And so what I thought it was is I thought I was going to be working with wild and domestic animals to prepare me for vet school. But in reality, it was the production and management of farm animals. And so I was stuck with these, I thought I was stuck with these two options of either being in animal science or in biology. And so I stuck out through the animal science program for about a year. And then I realized that domestic animal production is just not for me. And so then I was stuck. I had reached my first fork in the road in my career. And so I knew that there were the known career options, vet school, and I knew exactly what was going to come. And then I had a mentor at Tuskegee University tell me, hey, maybe you should try out this natural resource program. We have this 3+1 option and you can do all these great things. But it was a very unknown concept to me. It wasn't something that I had researched extensively. It wasn't something that I really knew about. And it took me away from my friends and everything that I was familiar with. Again, after I had just uprooted myself from Chicago, it was a very different curriculum. I was afraid that maybe I wouldn't graduate on time. I was leaving my support system, but I took a leap of faith. And it turned out to be a great decision. And I met new friends. I met new people who were interested in the same things that I was interested in. I got experiences being able to go out camping and learning how to handle guns and learning some of those essential skills that are going to be necessary if I'm going to be able to manage wildlife and the habitat that they exist in throughout the US. And so one of the important lessons that I got from Tuskegee University was one, that it was important for me to give back to my community. Sharing science, sharing knowledge. It was the first time that I was really introduced to extension and sharing research with the community that we were a part of. And the second lesson I got from there was to get a diverse range of experiences. Hopping into the natural resource program was something I had never been exposed to before. And I knew if I was really going to find out what I was passionate about, I would have to get a variety of experiences. And the third lesson was that don't be afraid to try and step out on a limb and do something new. It would be scary, but growth is uncomfortable. And there's a wide range of opportunities out there if you are brave enough to leave your comfort zone. And so I did that. And I looked for different programs and different internships that would give me that experience to be able to actually be qualified and eligible for a lot of these natural resource and wildlife careers. And so one of those experiences was with the Student Conservation Association with the Career Discovery Internship Program. And this was an opportunity to engage minority youth and to expose them to career options within the natural sciences and within wildlife. And so they placed us at different refuges across the US. And I was placed at Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge, which was, one of my first experiences at a national wildlife refuge. I was in, my role was in visitor services. And so I would be at the refuge and talk to people about the resource and, try and engage different students with what we had available. So one of the things that we would commonly do was go down and find frogs, because at our frog pond, frogs were always available. And it's something that really gets kids excited. But this was also my first experience just seeing a ton of different birds. Minnesota Valley National Wildlife Refuge is an urban refuge, but it's also a migratory hotspot. And so I was just there in time for like the end of spring migration. And so I didn't realize it was spring migration at the time, but I was seeing, all these different birds, and I was experiencing bald eagles flying over my head every single day, and being able to see, red-tailed hawks or vultures, and then just seeing wild turkeys like walk around like they owned the place, or seeing different birds at the bird feeders. And we even got the chance to see a juvenile Cooper's hawk fly into the bird feeder and try and, get up its hunting skills, which was something that I had never seen before. I had no idea that there were birds out there that ate other birds. And so really being at Minnesota Valley was an experience that felt like my eyes were being opened. I felt like for my entire life I had blinders on. And after leaving Minnesota Valley, it was like I was awakened to a whole new world. And so after that experience, I was really just going about and noticing birds all the time, no matter where I was. So whether I was walking out of class and seeing a cedar waxwing on the ground, or noticing that, this bird that I had seen at Minnesota Valley was actually on the yard, on our yard at Tuskegee, and just following it around with my camera and trying to get pictures to be able to study it up close. And really photography is the way that I was birding. That was my first experience with birding, because I was going and I was taking pictures of the different birds that I was seeing, even though I wasn't identifying them at the time. And so I would take pictures of these birds, and it wasn't really until I got into birding that I would go back and look through my phone or my camera and see that I had all of these amazing pictures of birds that I had no idea that I had seen before, like the Sora, which was amazing because I still haven't seen another Sora since that one time I've seen one. And so after that experience, I was still very much into birds, but there was also this conflict between wanting to make enough money over the summer so that I could support myself throughout the school year at Tuskegee, and wanting to do things that were related to birds. So again, I had kind of reached this crossroad. And so I took a little bit of a break from birds because there were no paid bird opportunities at the time. And I did a research experience for undergrads at Georgia Tech. And I was working with bees, but I was still working with community. So still bringing those lessons from Tuskegee with me, still engaging people and talking with people about the resources that they had around them, talking with them about, bees and pollinator gardens and why it's important that we have diversity in our cities and why urban gardens are important. But I was also doing research and looking at how cities were impacting bees, honeybees specifically. And after that experience, I was at the next portion of my career, and I had reached the +1 part of the 3+1 program. And so I had reached the point where it was time for me to make a decision. It was time for me to uproot myself again and figure out where I was going to do the last year of my program. And I ended up choosing Mississippi State. And this was an amazing opportunity for me because it was the first time that I had really done a lot of those like hardcore wildlife classes. So I took ornithology and I took mammalogy, and I got experience, helping other professors with research. And I, went out, and in this picture we're banding a red-tailed hawk. So he's taking the wing chord measurements, and we're catching red-tailed hawks in the city of Starkville. And this is on a rare 19-degree day when there was snow on the ground and the school was closed. But I was from Chicago, and the professor had done research in Canada. And so we said, let's go out there and look for red-tailed hawks. And it was an unforgettable experience. And I'm really glad that I took that opportunity because I was still very much so interested in birds. And while I was there, I also got the opportunity to work with USDA APHIS Wildlife Services at their National Wildlife Research Field Station. And here I was, again, working with birds and learning more about the research side of things. So actually being able to handle great egrets and think about how birds impact people economically, and thinking about how bird flu may be transferred between catfish ponds, or thinking about how double-crested cormorants might be eating fish off of catfish ponds in Mississippi, and looking at what their diet is like and seeing, are they actually doing what people are accusing them of, or are they actually eating the fish that are in the river? And how are all these things impacting birds, and how are they impacting people, and how does it impact our management decisions? And so I was working my way and figuring out the different things that would allow me to work with birds throughout my career. And so, like I said, that was a great experience. And there were, again, lessons from me being at Mississippi State. And that was one, that larger schools sometimes mean more opportunity because more money. And that it's important to take advantage of every opportunity while I'm at school, or, while you're at a place that has so many resources, even if it is a volunteer opportunity, because you never know what you might be able to do and what you ever might be able to engage with. And I also learned that microaggressions exist. Being at Mississippi State was the first time that I had ever been in a situation where I was the only in the room. And so I went to an all-Black high school, and I went to a university that was historically Black and that was majority Black. And so this was the first time that I had ever been placed in a situation where I was, either the only person of color in the room, the only Black woman in the room. And it was a very different experience for me. And it was the first time that I had been around and been in a class where I had heard a professor say something and it just didn't sit right with me. And I couldn't figure out at the time why it felt uncomfortable or why everybody was laughing. But for me, it didn't feel funny. And so I at the time, I didn't have the voice that I have now. And so I just kind of put that on my inner checklist and kept moving, pushing, and knowing that for me to be able to get where I wanted to be, I would have to go through uncomfortable situations, and I would have to be in a place that provided opportunity for career growth, but may not provide opportunity for personal development and building community. And so then I made the decision to leave Mississippi State and head my way to North Carolina State University, where I decided to look at bird diversity across urban areas. And with this, being at North Carolina State University, taking an environmental justice class for the first time in my career and learning about the different historical structures that exist that may influence where we find, green space, where we find trees, and where we find birds, it made me want to look at how bird diversity differs across socioeconomic neighborhoods in Raleigh as well as in other cities across the US, especially since Raleigh is a heavily forested city. And the first time that I had been somewhere that there were trees everywhere, even, unlike Chicago. And I really think that growing up in a city environment really made me want to pay more attention to how birds and people utilize those same spaces and how we can better manage green spaces in cities for the betterment of both wildlife and people. And so these are two completely different parks, one in New York and one in Raleigh. But Central Park is one of the top places for birding in New York, and this park in Cary on the left is just a great place to see birds and even sandpipers after a storm. And so I knew that I wanted to work with people and work with community and carrying those lessons from throughout my undergrad and getting people exposed to nature and nature-based opportunities and getting people involved in research and really getting them understanding about the nature in their neighborhoods. And so I ended up working with a citizen science project called the Triangle Bird Count, where we were mapping the diversity of birds across Raleigh, Durham, and a few other cities in North Carolina. And I did this because, like I said, I wanted to connect people with birds. I wanted to connect people, and I wanted to connect them with the nature that was in their neighborhoods. And that is something that I continue to do throughout my time at North Carolina State University, holding programs at different elementary schools and middle schools, and even getting high schoolers to be interested in working with birds or into the Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology program at NCSU through bird watching and bird-based activities. And so being in that, I really wanted to involve people in the research. But what I learned was that to really have a true project where you are engaging with community takes time. And so I say that my project is a citizen science project because it doesn't do the participatory type of engagement and collaborative work that I believe community science and participatory science does. And so for citizen science, it's a model that really engages people with the research and with researchers, but only to a limited extent. So actually doing like data collection, but not actually being extremely collaborative and focusing on the needs of the community and the common interest in building a project from the ground up with similar goals. And so I know that there has been a lot of talk recently about do we change the terminology from citizen science to community science? But I think in order for us to be more inclusive within the field and getting people engaged with science, we need to do more than just change the terminology and slap a Band-Aid over it. We really need to rethink how we're doing these projects and how we are engaging with communities and whether or not those communities will be better off after we leave or if we had never came. And so I think it's really important that we think about these and have these conversations instead of just trying to slap a Band-Aid on and without looking at some of those underlying consequences, because words matter. And through this project, I was able to find community for the first time at NCSU, but I was also able to find community in a different way. I was able to find community through an online virtual space, through Black AF in STEM, which originated as a group me. And it was a way to be free from microaggressions. It was a way to find family, kinship, safety, to be able to laugh, to be able to find identity and similarity in people who are in academia, in similar fields, and going through some of the same things that I was going through and things that I had experienced being at a predominantly white institution. And so through that group me, I actually found my flock. I found a group of people who enjoyed going birding, and we actually got up to, meet and be able to experience birds and go for the first time, actually go birding with someone else. And it was so much fun because I didn't realize like how much more I learned and how much better the experience is actually being able to go out with another person. And, people who were just as nerdy as me and people who loved, looking for birds and oohing and eyeing over specimens. And I also found my community through other birders in my area who are younger. And I think that's one of the problems with the birding community and why we have such a hard time with engaging a younger audience is because of the current demographics of birding. And so I can admit that I was hesitant to go to a lot of my local Audubon Society meetings because of the demographics and knowing that I would be the youngest person in the room and probably the only person of color, the only Black woman in the room. And so it was just additional barriers that made me a little more hesitant in order to, wanting to experience this thing that I really love to do and really enjoy doing, this hobby that I had found. But I still found myself being a little too nervous because of those previous experiences that I had had and not knowing how to navigate those spaces. And so through this online community, through the Black AF and STEM group me, we were actually able to curate this event called Black Birders Week. I hope you've heard of it. And it was a great week-long social media event where we had a bunch of different challenges, and we were able to connect people virtually, especially now during the time of the pandemic, and being able to really expose people to see the differences and talk about some of the different experiences that we have while we're outdoors, and really get people to see that, there aren't just a few of us here and there, that we are really present in this field, and we enjoy being outdoors, we enjoy birding, we enjoy these other outdoor activities. And so one of my favorite parts of that was the live stream discussion, which was called Birding While Black. And so it was really a chance for us to get together and talk about our different experiences going birding across generations and really talk about our experiences. And I think it opened the door for a lot of those critical conversations to be had about how to make birding more inclusive and how to get more people into birding. And I think that Audubon, North Carolina, or Audubon in general, is really doing their part to try and make sure that they are being an inclusive organization. And I realized this through an internship with them this past summer. I worked with Audubon, North Carolina as their coastal resilience intern. And not only was it a reaffirming experience for me, because it was the first time I was an actual practicing biologist outside of school. And it also, I was able to see some of the inner workings of the organization and realize the steps that they were trying to take to make sure that, you know, all of their employees felt comfortable and that they were working to become an anti-racist organization. And so with Audubon, North Carolina, I got to experience a little bit of what it's like to be a coastal biologist. And so I went down to Carolina Beach State Park and in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I was able to band royal tern chicks, and I was able to go on the islands at the state park and count pelican nests. And it was just a great experience to be able to, for the first time, really be able to realize what it's like to be a biologist.
Is this begging, or is this like get away from me? Get away from me. That can simulate to begging, but you're welcome to see how soft.
And so this was one of the experiences while we were actually at the park. And typically they do pelican banding every year, but this year, because of COVID and because you have to have two people actually, since you have to have two people who are actually banding one bird, it was something that they were unable to do this year. And so the biologist was just showing me some of the proper handling techniques and, you know, being able to handle pelicans, which was amazing. And I really think that throughout these different experiences throughout my career, I was really able to find not only my flock, but find myself and become more comfortable with being unapologetically Black and really being able to become a biologist, and this thing that I had only seen on TV as a kid and only, you know, thought about in zoos and thought about wildlife was in some foreign location. But I actually realized that we have so much great nature in our backyards, and I'm really excited that I've been able to share that with you. Throughout my career, I've realized now, being kind of on that, again, on that fork in the road, I've realized a few more life lessons, and that some of the reasons why we have some of that lack of diversity in our programming and in the field itself is because of lack of exposure to programs. Like I said in the beginning, just not having access or the knowledge about different programmings, and then having those pay-to-play opportunities that make you competitive in the field. So having experiences that, you know, study abroad experiences, or going to the Galapagos, or, you know, all these different things that make your application competitive, they're really stuck behind this paywall that a lot of minority students can't afford. And then there's a lack of a pipeline that aids in matriculation throughout, from going from an intern to actually being a full-fledged employee with any of these agencies or organizations. And so you have a lot of these one-time programs where there'll be a program in let's say middle school, but then a few, you know, that you might age out, or there'll be a high school program and then there's nothing. So there's a lack of a way that is currently helping a lot of these students get into these careers. And I think that one of the things that really helped me throughout my career was having mentors and having people who advocated for me, who saw my passion, who saw my determination, who saw me coming back, and who were able to, you know, speak on my behalf on the other side of the table and say, hey, I have this great student. Let's see what type of opportunities we have. And, you know, having people who were actually sharing opportunities with me and advocating for me on the other side, and helping me to, in unknown ways, get to where I wanted to be. And there's also that ability to build community that's really important, that I think is a lot of time really tough for a lot of minority students who are interested in this field, especially because there's the lack of the guidance about where to go, and then depending on where you go, not really being able to build community in a way that actually is supportive and helps you feel comfortable within this field. And so a lot of times we lose a lot of students who are interested in this field because of a lot of these different factors. But nevertheless, Black men and women belong in the outdoors. And so I'm really appreciative to be able to work with agencies that are really determined and want to make their programming more inclusive and make their programming more diverse, and who are fighting the good fight and really want to make sure that we can make the field of conservation look exactly like our country. And with that, I think I'll take some questions.
Deja, thank you so much. That was amazing listening to your story about connecting with opportunities and finding ways to keep your passion in your life. It's just so motivating. I cannot wait to get to these questions. But first, we have an advocacy alert from Sarah Brotherton, and then we'll get to these questions because there's some good ones. Sarah?
Sure, thanks. Yes, we have a new action alert. You can find it on the Society's webpage or under Conservation and then Act Now, or you can go to CASA's Facebook page to find it. The action alert is about a confined disposal facility that's operated by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's located where the Calumet River meets Lake Michigan, between Calumet Park and Steelworkers Park, and actually very close to where Deja grew up. The confined disposal facility contains millions of tons of contaminated dredge. And the original plan was that the Army Corps of Engineers was going to close the facility in 2022. The land was going to be redeemed and cleaned, and eventually a park was going to be developed there. But they have recently proposed instead to expand the size of the facility and extend the life of it for another 25 years. So the Friends of the Parks has an action going on, and so does the Sierra Club. So there's two different links that we have to those two different organizations, a way of voicing concerns. The Friends of the Parks has the list of city, state, and federal officials that you can contact, as well as example letters and all this kind of stuff. The Sierra Club has a petition you can sign. So there's the detailed approach, or there's the simple approach, but we recommend you do something to voice your concern. We have until August 17th to put in our comments. As you know, this is a community that has suffered environmental assaults for years. Here was an opportunity to close one off, and instead it seems to be growing. And so we recommend you check out those avenues for voicing your concern. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's quite a turnaround that's trying to happen there. Jen, if you're ready with questions, we can get to them.
Okay, we have some really thoughtful questions from the audience today, and I'll just go up the list. What specifically has Audubon been doing that you may consider them inclusive? And that's from Erin.
I think that from my experience working with them, I think they are working towards being a more inclusive and anti-racist organization. I don't think that they're there yet. I think that they have a lot of work to do, but being on the inside, what I saw was a lot of emails from the CEO being sent out to the different sub organizations, I guess, like Audubon North Carolina, where they were providing resources and they were purchasing like White Fragility and other books, and like constantly every month they were sending out a list of resources and providing time for their employees to actually read the resources and actually, you know, have the space to learn more. And I thought that the list was pretty good. And so I think it's a good start. I don't think that they are there yet. They're definitely not as inclusive as they could be. And there's a lot more that they need to work on, especially with that matriculation aspect and getting people from those internship positions into actual full-fledged careers. But I think they're on the right path.
Very good. And the next question I have is from Pat. They say, this was excellent, very thoughtful and inspiring. My question is, what would you like to be let's say, in 10 years?
So in 10 years' time, I would love to open up a urban conservation training center. And so being able to provide a space where people can come and be able to get a lot of those different experiences that they need, providing programming and partnering with schools, and just really having my own property and land that I could actually teach my programming out of, and have people come and experience a lot of the different certifications that they need. But this is after I want a career with the federal government. So we'll see. I have a lot of different career things that I want to do, but this is, that's definitely one of the top.
Gloria says, as 17 and 18-year-olds, they're asked to make huge life decisions that may get them into never-ending debt or wrong career choices. What would you recommend to educators and organizations that work with kids or teens to help better explain what it takes to be at a specific position or follow a certain career path?
I think that one aspect that's lacking that I would like to see more of are these natural resource careers in, let's say, like career days. And so I just know a lot of like, even like middle school and high schools, at least when I was there, like I don't remember ever having the natural sciences represented in those careers. You always get, you get doctors, you get people who are, you get firefighters and police officers and like, EMTs, and, you get all these other careers, but I don't ever really see the natural sciences really supported or present, I guess. And so I think that it would be really cool for a lot of these organizations to either partner with schools to either implement programming in the schools, or to be able to actually send some of their employees there for those types of days to actually help expose students, or even if it's just contacting career counselors and giving them a different list of opportunities for people who are interested in science. Because I know for me, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, they only told me that I could be a veterinarian, and that's not the most extensive list of what you can do or be in this field.
And a related question would be, what are some things you suggest for kids to be more involved? And that was from Laura.
Be more involved in outdoor,
getting them into birding. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to birding, the initiative has to come from our side, especially since some of the barriers to birding ends up being things like binoculars and actual equipment, or the knowledge of, how to ID birds. And so I think one of like an easy way would be to get kids to go outside and sit down with a notebook and have them sit and watch, a bird, or even if it's just get them to sit down outside and get them to watch what's going on around them. Have them sit still for about 15 minutes and just get them to write down what they see, get them to journal. And I had that experience at one point, and I really just noticed, the different things. And it was the first time that I had ever actually saw a deer ever. And I was like, whoa. And it came super close to me. And I was like, I didn't even know that they were here. You see them dead on the side of the road. But, I think just getting kids to like sit outside and, write down what they see and get them observing. Because that's the first step, being more observant about what's going on around you. But I definitely think that some of that additional initiative has to come from our side, and being able to partner with different schools or different community organizations and say, hey, birding is, it's a great hobby, and it's actually a way that we can get kids interested in science as well. So it's not, so it doesn't, not to say it doesn't seem like something that's useless, but I think people a lot of times think of birding as like, why would I do that when it, when it doesn't, when birds, if it doesn't connect to health or something like that. But I think birding is helpful for the mental health and happiness.
And another question, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, Prabita. Her question is, have microaggressions in conservation or birding ever made you want to leave those fields?
I think that I think microaggressions have made me realize that there are certain places that I cannot work. And it's a little disappointing because I know that I wouldn't feel comfortable working in some areas of the US. And it made me realize that I need to take a step back and take a break from academia before I keep going to pursue my PhD. And so I think that breaks are necessary. And I think that that's one way to deal with microaggressions, is to take a step back. I think that my passion for the field has made me look at microaggressions and just said, maybe this isn't the institution that I need to be at if they can't appreciate who I am.
And I see we're running out of time, so I will do one last question. And it came in right at the last minute. They have said they're struggling to find an outdoor community and mentor that they're comfortable with. What steps would you recommend to look for those?
I think to look for mentors, I think that's something that is a constant struggle in this field, and it's trial and error. I think being open about wanting a mentor from the student side of things would be very helpful. Just from the organizer or program developer, just knowing that, hey, you want somebody, you want the help, you're interested, conveying that interest is often really helpful. But it's something that I think we could improve on with finding a mentorship, like having a mentorship or organization. So that is one of the things that we really want to do with Black AF in STEM. And so send me an email at djperkins9012@gmail.com, and let's connect.
Thank you.
Fortunately, we're running out of time, but Deja, I just wanted to thank you. This has been a tremendous pleasure. Sitting here listening to your story has been just a wonderful experience for me. Thank you for creating these spaces where a lot of these conversations are being made explicitly brought into the light, and for helping us continue the dialogue. I also want to thank everyone who's helped out with this program today. Jen with the questions, Sarah with the advocacy alert, and everyone that helped put it together behind the scenes, everyone who showed up here today. Thank you for being here. Connect with us, go birding with us. We'll be around. We have a patch chat coming up August 23rd. It's another program where we do a deep dive into a specific location. We have Burnham Woods coming up. That's also going to be the McCormick Place and Northerly Island. There are some physical bird walks that we do right now at McKinley Park every second and fourth Saturday from 8 to 10 in the morning, and then also Jackson Park every Saturday at 8 o'clock. And we also do, I'm gonna go ahead and say it, it's not official, but we're trying to get some walks together at North Park Village Nature Center, trying to do some fall migration out there, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you, thank you, thank you everyone for being here. Deja, again, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for joining, everybody.